Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I would like to show you my collection of crawling philodendron, so let's get right into it. Let's look at them one by one. Alrighty, let's start off with my plowmanii. So this, I believe, is a narrow form plowmanii, and I haven't had it for all too long. I might have had it for half a year or so, but I had to propagate it in water first, and once it had a substantial root system, I potted it up. I'm giving all of my crawlers these long rectangular pots. I just found them on Amazon. It's really hard to find a rectangular pot that's not hideous. It's not the prettiest for sure, but it was quite affordable as well. It technically has self-watering capabilities. I don't actually use the self-watering capabilities, so I don't have any fabric or any wick that's kind of wicking up the moisture, keeping the pot moist. But what I do is basically I just water moisture them approximately once a week, and any excess water can just drain freely into that cache pot, and a little bit of water accumulates, which really makes these roots go crazy trying to find more water. So it's not a bad thing that these roots all come out at the bottom. There's plenty of nutrients in my water, so these roots are still capable of absorbing nutrients and water. So yeah, I don't mind having my plants a bit pot bound. Now this has only started crawling. It has quite small internodal spacing, which tells me that I'm giving it enough light. And what I really love about this plowmanii is the backside of the leaves and these nice ruffles on their petioles as well. So it's a super nice little crawler. It kind of lost a lot of its silver markings already. I don't know if that has anything to do with the conditions that I'm giving it or not. But overall, I'm really, really happy with the way that this one has started to grow and how it's taken to that pot. Yeah, really happy. 10 out of 10, could recommend, and I'm excited to see it grow even larger. Alrighty, next up we've got my Philodendron mamei. I've had this plant for quite a long time already, but it is just such a spider mite magnet. I'm having a hard time keeping on top of the spider mites. So to be honest, I just cut its leaves off. If there's too many spider mites on the leaf and I feel like I can't really salvage that, I'll just cut it off. And then obviously, yeah, it doesn't get all too lush. This is actually the only plant, not just the only crawler, the only plant full stop in my collection that is not in my usual aroid mix. This one is in a mineral mix called MAB, which stands for Mineral Aeration Blend, I believe. And it's just it's very similar to PON, I believe. PON is more commonly available in other countries. It's happy, it's growing, but I didn't really notice a huge benefit of the MAB over my aroid mix. If anything, I do think my aroid mix is kind of making the plants thrive a little more. So it was just an experiment just to see, but it wasn't really worth it. It's also a really, really heavy mix because it's just stones basically. So it was just really a pain to, source it and then use it and store it and everything because it was just so heavy. So I just tried it with this. It's not a failure. It's definitely growing. It's happy. It's got a great root system down here as well. But it's not, I can't notice a huge difference to my aroid mix. So yeah, I don't know. That's really all I've got to say about this one, apart from, yeah, if you want to get one of these, be prepared to definitely fight spider mites. I think this is one of the #1 spider mite magnets I have in my collection. So it's similar to any alocasia. So enjoy. Alrighty. Often confused with a mamei, and I believe it is actually a mamei hybrid. I couldn't really find good information on the internet about it. So if anybody knows, please let me know. But this is Philodendron Silver Cloud. So it is a little bit puffier, or it looks more like a little cloud. And it doesn't have quite as much veining as the mamei, but overall they look very similar. They also have similar petioles. This one also has cute little ruffles on the back. Now, technically, this is a crawler, and I've had one crawl before, and it died from root rot last year, or like a year and a half ago by now. So I just took what's left of the stem and I propagated it, and I got 3 little plants out of it, and I thought, let's do a little experiment. Over the years, I've been asked a lot whether it's possible to have a crawling plant climb up a moss pole. Now, to me, it doesn't really make sense. Why would you force something that's not supposed to? I believe that growing a plant in line with its natural growing pattern, or the way that it naturally wants to grow, will always be in the best interest for the plant. So you're probably going to have the best success if you grow it the way that it wants to grow. But, you know, I want to experiment and see for myself whether or not that's possible. Now, I believe that the silver cloud, I have seen silver clouds climbing-ish on the internet. I mean, I think there's different varieties potentially as well. I'm not too sure, but I feel like the silver cloud, out of all of the climbers I have, would have the best chances of potentially climbing, or at least I will need to make sure, I will kind of need to manipulate every single node as it's growing. So it's probably going to be a lot of work, and as soon as you stop being on top of it, it's probably going to revert back to wanting to crawl rather than climb. But I thought, let's give it a shot. At this stage, they're all still really, really small, so they don't actually have enough internodal spacing for me to really try and attach it to the pole. So at the moment, it's just planted in that 14 centimeter pot, and it has quite nice roots already. So I'm thinking that soon I might be able to try and fix a couple of nodes to that pole and see if it will climb for me. If not, I'll just pot it up in one of those rectangular pots as well. But I thought, you know, always worth doing a little experiment, see if I can learn something new. And I'll certainly share any results with you if there are any. Alrighty, next up, we've got my Philodendron pastazanum. One of those we're gonna continue calling a pasta. Now, all of the leaves are kind of pointing upwards based on the location that they're normally in. They're kind of on the floor in my bedroom, so the light is coming from above. So all of these leaves are kind of facing upwards rather than facing forwards, which is great for me to look at when they're in their location. Probably not the best for this YouTube video today, but I hope you can still see kind of the plant and what it looks like. Now, I only potted this up maybe 2 months ago, and I recorded that as well. So I've given it that rectangular pot, and it has already started crawling along the surface of the pot. So it has 2 shoots, and both of them are really happy after the repot. Doesn't look like it has actually suffered at all from that repot a couple of months ago. It has quite large internodal spacing, and I'm not quite sure why, because it is getting as much light as the other ones as well. They're all in the same spot, and the other ones don't seem to have that large internodal spacing. So I don't know if it wants more light or if that's just its natural spacing. I suppose I will find out when summer comes. Maybe with summer, the internodal spacing is going to go down a little bit due to longer sunlight hours. Now, moment of truth, I don't think I've lifted that up in 2 months. Let's have a look. Whee! Yep, all right, that's definitely happy. It's grown a few roots out of the pot and into that little water reservoir down below. So definitely has adjusted really well to its repot. Beautiful. Right, so let me just show you where they are normally located. So they're just on the floor over here, right next to my east-facing window. So they get a little bit of morning sun, but a lot of bright indirect light. Made up pasta is having these large internodal spacing because it gets shaded by the Dean McDowell a little bit. So I'll adjust that. But basically, I put it here because I thought it's kind of the most natural of growing conditions for it. In nature, these would crawl along the forest floor. So the light would always obviously come from the top. I mean, in nature, the light always comes from the top, but I don't believe they need quite as much light as some of these climbing plants over here. So hence, I kind of put them in this more shaded corner, shaded just from that little piece of wall on the right over here. But they're getting so large, specifically the Dean McDowell, that it doesn't really get much shade anymore. So I'll see if I can find a different spot for it. Alrighty, next up we've got Philodendron gloriosum. Philodendron gloriosum was my first velvet plant ever. So this is over 2.5 years old, and it's definitely not as large as it could grow in 2.5 years. I basically had a full reset about 1 year ago, when all of the leaves just had way too much spider mite damage. The root system kind of had a bit of rot. So I just cut off all the leaves. I propagated it again and then potted it up in this pot about a year ago. So this is really just a year's worth of growth. But technically, I've had this plant for 2.5 years. I was just not that experienced with it for the first 2.5 years, and I made many mistakes, but that led me to actually learning so much about these crawlers that I'm now a little bit more confident with them. So what have I learned? Well, first of all, I've learned that they're like my aroid mix, the way that I make it, but I make it slightly more water retentive. So I put a little bit more cocoa peat in it, but I still want to make sure there's a lot of aeration and drainage. So I think the problem I had before with these crawlers, I was trying to make their mix really water retentive, but as a result of that, it wasn't aerated enough, and I've had root rot on a couple of them. So since I switched my mix, and I have a separate video with my aroid mix as well, I haven't had any root rot issues with these climbers again. The second thing is definitely get onto these rectangular pots if you can. So you can really see that this plant started over here and then crawled all along this pot. Now it has lost its previous leaves due to just due to spider mite damage. I cut them off, and yeah, you can see that I don't do anything. It kind of crawls along this pot by itself, and you can see that sometimes it also wants to crawl a little below the surface of the potting medium, which is totally fine. You'll notice that if it's kind of just hovering on top, the plant is getting really wonky. And I'll show you with my Dean McDowell in a second, which hasn't quite established as much. So I believe the plant kind of crawls a little bit lower, almost below the surface of the potting medium, just for stability purposes. So this is pretty stable now. It has rooted really well into this pot, but it has just reached the end of its pot, right? So I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I didn't really want to give it a larger pot. I just don't have enough room for like really large pots and really large plants. And really this whole, the bottom 2/3 of this pot is kind of empty anyway. So I didn't really feel the need to give it a bigger pot just to have so much emptiness. So what I've done is I did a couple of cuts, actually 3 cuts, 1, 2, and 3. And these are just, stem pieces, but they're all rooted. So they have all given me little shoots. So once they have formed their first little plants, what I'll do is I'll take it out. I'll put this top bit at the bottom of the pot again, fill it up with more aroid mix so it can crawl along the pot again. And these ones I'll just pot in a separate pot. Now, this plant is often getting confused with Philodendron glorious, which I'll put a photo up on screen. So Philodendron glorious is a hybrid of gloriosum and melanochrysum. Melanochrysum is a climber. So usually glorious comes after the melano parentage and is also a climber. But with all hybrids, one or the other parentage can be dominant. I've seen glorious that tend to crawl a little more than they climb, but the one that I have, or the one that I've commonly see sold over here, is definitely more heavy in melano parentage and likes to climb. The names are just so similar that I've had a lot of people reach out to me being super confused why my gloriosum is climbing or why my glorious is crawling and so on. So I think it's just people getting confused with the words, with the names. So gloriosum is the species and it's a crawler. Glorious is the hybrid between gloriosum and melanochrysum and is a climber, a little bit darker in leaf color as well. If you're after a crawling plant, definitely gloriosum is a really beautiful plant. There are different types of gloriosum as well. In Australia, I believe this one is the only one that we have available, but some that have the veins are much whiter as well. So there are some really beautiful varieties out there, and they can also grow really, really large if you just give them enough time and care. Alrighty, and last but not least, we've got Philodendron Dean McDowell. Philodendron Dean McDowell is a hybrid of gloriosum and pastazanum or pastazanum. So the 2 previous ones that I showed you, this is the hybrid of both of them. It gets these really beautiful pillory large leaves. By the way, all of the plants just got a spray today just to spray off any cat hair, any dust that accumulates, but also I believe having clean leaves is preventing any pest issues as well. pretty much all of my crawlers, if they have any pest issues, it will be spider mites. I haven't really discovered any other pests on any of them. Now this one I only potted up maybe 3 or 4 months ago. Sorry, I'm kind of losing track of time. And these two are the 2 leaves that it has grown since I repotted it. So it's definitely really happy. I'll show you a close-up as well. The problem with this one is that these leaves are so large, it's really kind of wonky in its pod, and I'm worried that one day all the roots are just going to snap. So yeah, you can also see that it doesn't really crawl along the surface of the pod. So maybe this is one where you could potentially try and force it up a pole. But it has grown a really thick stem already. And the thicker the stem, the harder it is to kind of manipulate your plant later on. So I've chosen to not give this one a try on a moss pole. I also think the petioles would just be way too long for a moss pole. They would just be sticking in all directions. So I'm growing it the way that it's intended to be grown, as a crawler. But it has already reached the end of its pod really soon, or it will reach it really soon. So I really need to find maybe a larger pot, or I'll need to do the same with this one as I did with my gloriosum and just chop it up, because really this leaf is not going to make it for much longer anyway. So really the beautiful part of the plant only begins on the second half of the pot anyway. So maybe I'll do that, but yeah, this one has potential to grow absolutely huge, right? So see how fast and how big I can grow it. So yeah, with all of my crawlers, they get the exact same fertilizing schedule as all of my other plants. So I use GT Foliage Focus weekly. So I pretty much water and fertilize all of my crawlers weekly. But of course, if it's a really wet, rainy week, then maybe I'm being a little bit more conscious with the watering. If it's a really scorching hot summer week, then I might water it a little more frequently than just once a week. So take these sort of frequencies just, as a general guideline. But ultimately, it really depends on the size of your plant, your location, the weather, the humidity, whether the plant is growing or not, the size of the root system, your medium, and so on. So there's so many variables that my tip of once a week is probably going to mean nothing to you. So let's pick this one up and see if this has any roots as well. Oh, Jesus. Yep, okay, this has definitely grown a lot of roots. Okay. I honestly, I didn't expect that. So clearly it's very happy, so maybe I should just organize a larger pot for it. I'll think about it, and I'll definitely update you once it's due for a repot. Alrighty, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.